Hi, everybody. My name is Osnat. I am going to be your host today because our co-founder of Paciton Network, Moira, as you can see here on the screen, she's waving, is a little under the weather today and she'll speak a little bit later, but I'm going to be hosting this hour with you. Welcome to our monthly 50-50 conversation series. Every month we bring another topic, except today, but it is a topic in a way. You know that this year is the 10th anniversary of the Paciton Network. In 2013, it came to life with Moira Allen and Jen Hively co-founding this really incredible international organization that connects active aging advocates from everywhere. And when we celebrated it in January, we said, okay, we're just now, this is the anniversary year. These are all the things that we want to do, and we move right to business. So I'm going to go over some of the stuff that we did during the year, and then we open the floor for all kinds of thoughts, what you're excited about, etc. And in February, one of our pioneers, Margaret Young, who is the chairperson of GARUP, spoke about the upcoming Age with Rights Global Rally and how everyone can participate. Later this hour, I'm going to invite you on behalf of Margaret to participate in the day of the International Day of Older People, where you can create a video and share it with the world, but that's later. In March, we showcases the cutting-edge policies implemented in Singapore for adapting aging to an aging society, and our guides were Dr. Catherine Braun and Dr. Colin Shida, also Paciton members, Paciton Network members for a long time. And then things started to speed up. In early March, Moira and a few other pioneers went to the Reactis conference in Strasbourg in France, and conference was presented the research on the rights of older people during COVID-19 pandemic. It was a research done in 18 countries on 4 continents. And the results that were shown there, no surprise that older people were not respected. And Moira spoke about PION and aging in Africa. Right after that, Moira and colleagues went to EUREG conference in Prague. The topic this year was on healthy and unhealthy aging of the human brain. Moira spoke there about the awareness of using mental and physical potential as long as possible as we age. And we also heard from Donna Stenova, another longtime pioneer, who is the EUREG Secretary General, about other topics and perspective regarding aging. Yes, it all builds up because it's all leading to the next building block, which is the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People, GARUP, global rally for rights of older people. As I mentioned before, Margaret Young is the chairperson of this organization. And PION also sponsored and participated in 2 rallies that supported this global rally. One was FUFA, United Francophones Against Ageism. This will be the loose translations. Collaborated with Old School, which is the clearinghouse for all things anti-ageism. And they had a web conference on inclusive society at any age. And right after this was the When Design Meets Human Rights of Older People. And it was a forum of designers and others who spoke about democratization of design of public services and public policies. And all these events highlighted the specific challenge facing all the people in the world and the need to include their life, their lived experience, when it comes to policy decisions. So where does it all take us? It takes us to the biggest event of the year, which was in April. And in April, pioneers and other members who joined advocated in New York in the United Nations 13 Open-Ended Working Group on Aging. Just to mention a few pioneers that was there. Moira was there, Bruce Frankel was there, Bruce is here online with us. Himanshu Rath from India, from Age Well. Margaret Young from GARP, I was there. Paulette Metang from Cameroon, and Eli Mugaboushema from Rwanda. And we all were there championing the rights of all the people at the UN. And I think it worked because this year was an important breakthrough in the work of the UN Working Group, where for the first time in 13 years, so this was a 13, next year is going to be the 14th, so it's going to take a while, but after 13 years, there was a global agreement among member states and the civil society to move forward, identifying human rights protection gaps and the next steps. And this is something that, as far as we understand, has not happened before, and really opened a new chapter towards a convention for the rights, human rights of older people in the world. So one of the things that struck me was that since 2010, there were many examples that documented by all the civil societies presented to the United Nations. There were more than 800 submissions by the UN Working Group, academia, all the people in National Human Rights Institution, all gaps that show where older adults are marginalized and no law in the world is protecting them. So, but unless we pay attention to them, we don't see them. I can just demonstrate to you one of them that really struck me is that when you have climate calamities, I don't know how it happened, what actually took place in Hawaii this past week when there was a fire and claimed many, many lives of many people. If there was a particular contingency of how to evacuate people, older people who are not able to drive or escape themselves from that particular disaster. We know from other stories of hurricanes and other natural disasters that there wasn't. People just assumed that people will take themselves and move themselves out of the danger zone. So just one example. So the United Nations was a huge success, and in following this, there were several intersession meetings to do a lot of pre-work towards the 14th session. For example, in I think it was in June, there was a timeline prepared by the co-facilitators of intersessional work. And that timeline had all kinds of milestones that had to be met between the 1st April and the next April. On July 12th, there was the first, so that was on the timeline, the first UN briefing. And that briefing was by the independent expert on enjoyment of all human rights by older persons and representatives of human rights treaty bodies and regional mechanisms. It's a mouthful, but it just means that all the people, all the stakeholders were in the same room and heard an update of what took place in the meantime. The next one is going to be in September, and I'm going to speak about this a little bit later, of what you can do to help that become more impactful. In our June conversation, we explored a topic called economia amable, a broader definition of what compassionate economy means, and guided us through this conversation was Sylvia Zweifel from Argentina, who's also here on the call. Sylvia, you can wave. Yeah, there's Sylvia. And in July, our 50-50 conversation brought us a specific view of how the largest country in Africa, Nigeria, is adopting national policies to advance the well-being of its older citizens. And we did this with the help of Dr. Omokaro, the Director General of Nigeria's National Senior Citizen Centers. Then there's a recent exciting development following many explorations. The Paciton Network's Southern African Network is actually happening with the reliable contribution of longtime Paciton Network members. And we're going to learn more about it in the near future. I don't know, Moira, do you want to say your 35 words about that?
Thank you, Asnet. I would love to say a few words about it because I'm passionate about this development. We started 2 years ago and slowly have built up the number of people represented in the different countries. And our aim is to get Paciton Network people in all of the 16 countries that belong to the African Union's Southern African Economic Community. So we're not right there now, but the exciting development is twofold. Number one, we were very blessed to have an excellent intern who was in fact attached to the university that did the study on the abuse of elder rights during the COVID event. And he did a very good study for us of what has happened. And he asked everybody through a series of about 20 questions, what worked, what didn't work, and what we could do to improve in the future. And he had an excellent response. About 90% of the members replied. So we've now got a really clear route ahead with what we need to do and what we don't. So that was the one thing. And then he interviewed absolutely everybody, and we're going to be producing a very succinct document. And then the really interesting development is that we've got a woman called Nesta Hatandi, who is an international development consultant based in Zimbabwe. And Nesta is going to take on the coordination of this whole group. And she's going to be working specifically with the human rights issue and closely with Margaret Young and Garop to get us all to answer the questionnaire that we will talk about later. And that is really a very, very interesting development. And the other very interesting development is what's going to be happening with the U3A, which was started by our pioneer in Oxford, Tom Holloway. And the U3A is now being running in 2 different countries via WhatsApp groups. And it works extremely well. It's much more practical for Africa. So what happens, for example, if they're wanting to talk about dental care, they find the right expert, and the expert records about 90-second clips, a series of 6 or 7 on basic dental care. And these they then get floated on the WhatsApp session for a month, and everybody interacts and there's follow-up. So the idea with that would be that we would slowly aim to build WhatsApp groups for the third age up through English-speaking Africa, and there's 17 different countries there. And then we would try to syndicate the information so that what is done in Zimbabwe can be repeated elsewhere. So we've got really exciting prospects there, and we are looking forward to developing that. And our next meeting is at the end of this month, where we're going to really set down the specific objectives for the year ahead. Thank you.
Wow. So see, nobody's sitting on their hands. And here we are, we're midway in Paciton Network 10th anniversary. And I think I used that metaphor before. We're standing on this hill and we look back and we see all that stuff that already taken place, that all of you were part of, directly and indirectly. And it's really exciting. I would like to just acknowledge all that acknowledge his accomplishments, acknowledge this path forward, acknowledge this network, and acknowledge this these connections that we made and the conversations that we had and the actions that we took. And bravo to bravi and bravo to all of you. And yeah, so we have another 5 months ahead of us. I want to mention Margaret Young was going to be here today, and she broke her toe this morning, and she cannot be with us. She has to take care of herself, but she left a message with me to share with you. We said that on the now I draw a blank. Maybe one of you know when is the International Day of Older Persons. It's in October.
1st of October, isn't it?
1st of October. Excellent. There's so much work to do before that. If you remember in the last 2 years, we asked, on behalf of Garop, we asked to create up to 2-minute videos talking about something that supports the rights of older people. This year, we actually have 2 places where we can use those videos. And I'm going to send separately a link to where you can find a direction of how to make this video. It's really easy. You just hold your phone and you speak to it and you send it to a particular email address. These videos can be used for 2 things. One is to promote the International Day of Older People, but more than that, if they're sent before September 15th, they will also be used in the next intercession update for the open-ended working group for aging that we mentioned before in the United Nations. To promote and to apply more pressure on member states to act and to move faster with this convention. So on September 30th, there's going to be the next update where Claudia Mahler, the independent expert on human rights for older people, she will be speaking at the Human Rights Council, and we could use those via Garop. We could use those videos to bring up more awareness. We was going to use them in all outlets of social media, but also send them to the people who are stakeholders and decision makers in that arena, and also use them for the day after for the International Day of Older People, older persons. Claudia will also speak in the General Assembly in early October, and for this, we also need those videos. So watch the highlights that we're going to send by Friday in your mail, and there'll be links there to how to make the video and what to do with that. So please do it. It's 2 minutes. You're all passionate about this. Do it, and the more we have, the better. I think last year we had for the UN event, we had more than 20 videos from Pacitor Network members. Why not? We have so much to say. We have so much to give.
Asnet,
Yes.
are there any examples that you could share of some of those other videos that would maybe help kind of be a little model for us?
Yes, and I'm going to include those links in there.
Excellent, thank you.
They don't have to be 2 minutes. They can be 1 minute. You know how much you can say in 1 minute. I've been talking now for about 20. And that was that was quite a bit. So yes, that was basically the looking back part.
That's not. Are the videos supposed to be directed at the theme of the this year? Yeah.
Yes. So I'm looking here at Margaret's email. You know, advocacy for inclusion, enjoyment, human rights of all the persons. Margaret has a video. I'm going to put the link, when one of you talk, I'm going to put the link in the chat. Margaret did a video on homelessness among older adults. And it's very interesting because what I learned from that short video was that homelessness among younger people is going down and homelessness among older people is going up. And this is quite startling. And it's a gap. So if we want to speak about gaps, for example, you know what? I'm going to bring up let me see if I can find it very quickly. I'm going to just show you a short list. Yeah. Here we go. This is a short list of the gaps some of the gaps that were identified that need attention for the rights of all the people. And if you look here, some of them are kind of generic and general, and some of them are a little bit more specific. And I would say if you're going to make a video of 1 to 2 minutes, you can look at any of these or find more, because there, as I said before, there are more than 800, and tie to something from your own experience, something that you see around, something that you yourself have experienced that you think is a gap and needs to be changed and needs to get attention from the world, from your government, from your community. This is your voice, and thanks to social media, thanks to digital power of the world, we can send this message everywhere. And by the way, it doesn't have to be in English. It can be in any language, because we know that YouTube has the facility to translate it in subtitles to practically any language. So do it in any language that you feel like. So I'm going to stop sharing. This is a part of a document that I'm going to share in the highlights from this call that we're going to send by the end of the week.
I think Peter's got his hand up.
Thank you, Maria. I think that since we're just about to leave the past and go into the future, I wonder if I could ask you 2 questions. Over these months, as you've been talking about these issues, have the rights of future elders, that is to say, children, come into the conversation at all? And given we started our conversation with about how bad the weather is, hot and everything else around the world, where is the conversation about the effects of the climate crisis on older people and younger people particularly? That's an intergenerational issue. I'm just hoping that Pass It On is going to contribute to those conversations. Otherwise, we won't have anything to pass it on to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad, Peter, that you're bringing this up. As you remember, exactly a year ago, we had a series of 4, maybe 5, that you were leading sessions about the 7th generation. What do we bring from 7th generation before us, and what are we giving to the 7th generation ahead of us? And definitely we're going to revisit some of these topics again, because especially this summer, so since we're talking about climate and weather, we're going to see, we have been seeing the impact of climate change on older adults, how it interferes, how heat interferes with their medication, how heat interferes with their life, how many deaths you have because of hot weather. There are many groups around the world of seniors against for climate change. So this is not a trivial topic, and definitely when it comes to natural calamities like we've been seeing in hurricanes and fires and floods and all the stuff, has a direct connection. It's challenging. It's not all going to happen here. And we definitely hope, I think everybody around this proverbial fire, not fire, cold water fountain is going to take something, the thing that they're most passionate about, into their community, the friends, the families, the governments, and start putting energy under that or behind that topic. We are a network, and the thing that we are most proud of here is that we connect everybody. And if you could just look at your screen and you see that there are people here from at least three, definitely two continents, northern and southern hemisphere. And we are encouraging you not only to speak with one another here, but also to bring these conversations into the people in your life and to your communities in your life and the governments in your life and the world you live in.
And could I just say one quick thing? Thank you for that. And yes, it's because of the richness of this network and the depth over time that I think you have a role to play. For example, Bill McGibbon's third act is arbitrarily defined as a movement for people over 60. It takes very little attention, really, to the whole notion of elderhood and what it means to be somebody alive in the world today. And let me just say one last thing. Language. There are no natural disasters left, with the exception of earthquakes and volcanoes. Everything that's happening to us is happening to us because of us and because of our generation. And by that, I mean floods and droughts and hurricanes and cyclones and a few other minor things. I think we'll eventually be affecting volcanoes and earthquakes. We are affecting earthquakes when we frack. So can I recommend that we seriously ask the question when we say natural disasters, whether we're somehow excusing us from our role in contributing to those. And my apologies for getting on my...
Definitely good point. What is natural anymore? Richard, you were going to say something?
No, not at this point. I have some questions, but I'll hold those.
Why? This is the time to ask questions, to have opinions, to speak about the future and the past.
So just a personal reflection, and that is, as you know, Osnat, I've been very engaged on a local level working on digital equity and digital inclusion, which is a little different issue, although it's related to all the others. And from just because my focus has been local, I have not been involved with these UN activities. And I know that for a number of you, it's a high priority. So what I'm wondering is, it seemed to me that it's been a kind of a subset of the PION membership who have been engaged with this UN process. And I'm wondering if there is some way to connect the two more effectively. In other words, to bring these activities that go on, from my perspective, often somewhere else. I'm on the West Coast. I'm not that close to New York, and I know some of you are even farther away. But it seems to me that the PION activities I've been involved with, which I greatly value, has been about local activities. And then from time to time, we hear about this very high level discussion that's going on this UN level. And to me, there's sort of a disconnect between the two of them. When it comes up in a session like this, it sort of reminds me, oh yeah, you guys are working on this stuff. But I don't, as a member of PION, personally, I don't feel other than like maybe doing a 2-minute video, don't feel very involved or engaged with it, or really understand very well where it's going and what impact you hope to have.
Richard, you're not alone. Even the people of the UN are very disconnected and don't understand where it's going.
It's so true. And Richard, I wanted to add here that when you're saying this, actually, it does bring to the forefront, I guess, for me, that we have been featuring the UN activity quite intensely in the last few months. Part of it's because of, you know, it was so exciting to go and be there and witness it firsthand. And definitely we want to make sure that what we bring here is balanced. And as you know, you are part of September, and I'm going to do a little public service announcement here. In September, we are going to speak exactly about this. We are going to have local perspectives on global issue. We're going to speak about digital equity, a topic that came up here many, many times in the conversations. What about digital equity? We're going to dedicate the 50/50 September to that, and our perspectives are going to come from Silicon Valley, California. That's Richard. We're going to have a representative from Nigeria and a representative from India, and we're going to hear about that topic as it's happening in these three large countries. And I'm sure that this is going to yield some very interesting insights and questions and comments and ideas. And so in a way that's bringing it to locally, globally, is what you're saying, Richard. One of the things—
And in fact, I mean, a session like this is, to me, exactly a demonstration of the value and the power of PION, because, you know, it's not surprising that folks in Silicon Valley are interested in digital equity. You know, we're the techie nerds out here. But I am very excited to hear about India and Nigeria, which I know very little about. And I think it's that aspect of sharing on a global scale, which is really the unique contribution that PION makes. So yeah. I value that enormously. But again, that's very local activity. And that seems to me on a sort of a different plane than what's going on at the UN. And I guess to me, there's still that disconnect.
So just last comment on that, and I'm going to shut up after that, maybe. The topic would not have come to the UN had it not started locally. And this was one thing that that became very clear to me during that week in the United Nations, that there's some kind of a loop there, feedback loop, that you have grassroots, local interactions with the local communities that create enough buzz, that bring it to the national level, and it creates enough buzz there either to do what happened there in Nigeria, where they created the Center for Senior Citizens to address some of those issues, or it goes beyond that. If enough countries have that noise from within the country that comes from the very local level, and they bring it to the United Nations to be addressed there. And if something is happening there, it's happening because all these local interactions are loud enough to make it heard in the United Nations. But even more than that, to have it heard in their local countries, in the local communities, in the local cities, in the local locale, to make a change and to offer solutions and changes that impact the people, the local people. I know it's kind of convoluted, but
no,
it's coming. You have to have your voice heard in order to have many voices heard.
You make a good point, Asnat, because for those of us who were there at the UN, you see the disconnect between what's said by representatives and the people who show up who are immediately affected by things, and the people who were most moving and most persuasive, and were the people who came there from nonprofits or and spoke from the heart and from experience rather than from some bureaucratic position that they were reading off of. So, you know, to your point, Richard, everyone is disconnected until someone shows up and voices their experience. You know, having covered the UN, I can tell you, you know, as a reporter, I can tell you that you could live there and still be disconnected.
Let's shift gears here. And I think the point is taken, and we definitely pay more attention to bringing those local perspective from as many places as possible. We've done it in the past, and it always yielded interesting connections, while still keeping in mind that we all live in a larger system. We have just concluded 7 months of all kinds of stuff, and we're looking forward to the next 5. And anybody from whom we haven't heard yet, do you have any thoughts, opinions, insights, suggestions? We have gerontologists here, we have scientists, we have psychologists, we have people from everywhere. So what do you have in mind? It's okay.
Yes.
Yes. Just a very quick thing. I came across a fellow called Gunther Pauli. He's in Belgium, and he is very much into he's actually developed the concept called the blue economy. And I don't want to go into it now because I don't know enough about it, but he concentrates a lot of his work, not all of it, but a lot of his work on children. And he's created 365 fables to teach children about nature. And just as I understand it, his concept is that in nature there is no waste. There is no unemployment. Everything has its use. Everything is used and everything can be recycled. And he's built his whole thing around that. And it's just so fascinating. So I just wanted to mention that especially because of the children aspect. Do you know about his work? I can send you his site and all the rest.
I actually do. I'm working with somebody in Greece who's developing an intergenerational economy in a small town around mushrooms.
Okay.
That's a little detail there. But more importantly than that, there are a couple of things. One is, I think, at the core of what we have to do in the work in the world is changing economies. I mean, the economic system that we have, call it what you want, unbridled capitalism or neoliberalism, is what is at the heart of some of our issues, I think. And so engaging kids in helping to create a new economy, I think is really important. And fairy tales, we got to go forward, but we also got to go backward and realize that we human beings at some point in our indigenous ways did a little better job relating to each other and to nature. So creating stories and fairy tales have been a source of human wisdoms for quite some time, I think is really important. So I like that about his work as well. So thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, I don't know him personally.
I put his link into the...
Oh, super.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Bruce.
Any other thoughts, insights?
Well,
What makes you excited about the next 5 months with Pass It On Network? What would you like to have happen?
Well, one thing I was going to suggest or think about related to what Peter said and what we're doing in September is I was wondering if perhaps we could do something similar around climate change and elders and find. I mean, we've had obviously Peter and what happened before, but essentially bring together maybe some prime advocates who have good projects going around the world that are related to
Mhm.
elder action and climate change, and focus on 3 or 4 of those in a session.
Yeah, it's a good point. Noted. It's in the video. Well, we made the commitment. What else? Yeah.
In the same direction. When I listen about this bureaucracy, this connection, experience that was mentioned here, and local and worldwide disconnected, because it's not that we need to go from the local to the worldwide. We can see that together, moving together. And it is the same when we think about past, present, and future. It is not because past generations that we are here now, the past, with this, facing these challenges. Yes and no. If we expand the notion of our present, including more generations that are already gone and generations to come, our present expands and we will be able to see more. It is similar than what Günter Pauli does with zero waste, because all that experiences are in our realities. So acknowledging those that are very valuable and nutritious for our next steps, and redeeming those that are not nutritious. Like this, we always listen here when older people are not cared for, but it is not only about older people. When we look around, we see the same for children, for dogs, for whatever. So learning how to be more loving and caring in our actions, our thoughts, and our feelings, and also our organization, that will bring together the local to the general, to the worldwide at the same time. And we expand those capacities. I believe we really need that. And that is upgrading our ways. So it is wonderful that, Peter, Moira wrote it. Thank you, Moira, for bringing that. Perhaps, I don't know if I was clear enough, but that's it.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from anybody about the future, about what you have done? What have you been seeing around in the past 7 months, or what you'd like to see or plan to see in the next 5?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm really very pleased to be here. I'm in Israel. I'm an Israeli. I'm a sociologist, and since I retired from academia, I've been working with people shortly after retirement in order to empower them. I call it consciousness raising because I'm a feminist. Consciousness raising to their own powers, to their abilities, and also raising awareness to the terrible effects of ageism. Now, what I find most relevant in all this interesting discussion here, and I'm really, really impressed, I think that the question here was whether we need to concentrate on the local or the global. I've heard several years ago of this intention of the United Nations to have this Declaration on the Rights of the People, and I think that could be very, very helpful to places, to all over the world where there isn't enough organization, there isn't enough power, including political power, really to resolve so many issues that exist as regards elder persons. And so first of all, I'm really very impressed by the fact that people here are involved in the setting up of the United Nations Convention. And I feel that it's true that people from different countries can submit their input, but I think that the final, if there is such a convention, would be extremely helpful. I can say that in Israel, I think we really lack the awareness of global activities to improve the situation of elders. And I think that, I know as a sociologist, I used to always teach the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Children. And when students hear that this is something internationally accepted and someone has already phrased it and one goes into it, it opens up deep discussion. It's not just one person bringing an idea or one person telling of a chat I heard on the Zoom, but this is something very, very powerful. It's something that one has to take a stand as regards that. So I think that this, so I want to support all those people who are involved with the United Nations. And I think that that is very, very important. And that can be, that can help people in different countries, including those who aren't represented here, to really bring it forth with better backing from an international organization, because one expects that to be the end result of international thinking. And then the thinking is not local, which is always limited, because in each locality one thinks of the specific issues. But the global issue, I think, can be very, very helpful. So personally, I'd be very happy to hear that this is moving ahead, because I heard of this intention of having this convention. By the way, when I tell people in the groups that there is this talk of having this convention of the rights of elder people, first of all, they are surprised. Who says we need it? But then I also compare it to the Convention on the Rights of Children. That means we know that the rights of man are not the same as the rights of women, are not the same as the rights of children. And I think it's very important to pay attention to the specific rights that need to be protected in the case of the elders. So I'm waiting for that to be out.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. As you know, there's the right of children and people with disabilities and women, and now it's time to think about the peoples who are old now, will be older later, and are not old yet, because it's all connected. Time does not stop, aging does not stop. We can stop some other stuff. And I think Margaret told us that to get the Convention for the Rights of Children, it took well over 60 years. So we know that the effort that all of us are doing now, globally and locally, is going to transcend us. And just we might benefit from this, but if not, it's going to be the 7th generation.
That is a very long time, 7th generation. Let's hope it's in our lifetime.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I can say something, Osnas.
Yes, go ahead, Rebecca.
Very, very brief. I don't know how to start this, but I'm just at times wondering what can be done about the situation of older adults in the growing times of war, conflict everywhere. Perhaps we can think about a topic around peace and sustainability in the future, and trying to see how or where we place older adults, how they are protected during times of war, during times of conflicts, during times, these days, just every time when we listen to the TV, you hear that somewhere they are fighting somewhere, and then we wonder, where are the older adults? How are they protected at times like this? I think that's one area that I'm interested in.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. It was definitely identified as one of the gaps in this long list of the UN gaps that of the rights of older people.
Okay.
It's really global, we have, so as you said, there's so many examples of big and small wars where the older adults are just becoming a collateral damage. Bruce and then Brian.
Brian, why don't you go first since I've already spoken?
Brian, if you can take yourself off mute.
There we go. I partly also aware not only of the wars, but of the tragedies like Maui and such, where, as I understand it, many elders were kind of caught and left behind. I just read a book, and it may be more American than worldwide, but it's A Life Worth Living by Miroslav Volf. And I had this suspicion that, again, we tend to think fairly rather shallow, as to what life means and what our place in it. And the thing about this book that I so appreciated was it was looking at how do we get people to look beyond, the immediate, to the deeper question of what a life worth living is. And I appreciate that among the people who are here, and think that anything so I'll stop with that, but it's a good book.
Thank you, Brian. Bruce?
All I was going to say is I particularly appreciated what Judith was saying, because what strikes me over and over again when we have these conversations is until there's a universal movement that brings together older adults everywhere and puts pressure on the representatives of nations to create protection for older adults, there won't be any power for older adults, because it's too easy for countries to overlook the lives of older adults. And when they're segmented into nations where nations have other priorities, the rights of older adults simply get lost. And so to me, ultimately, whether it's climate change or protecting older adults against abuse when they have dementia, or if it's lifelong learning or social or economic security, all those issues need to be addressed. And the only way to do it is through a convention. But, as we saw when we were at the United Nations, it's 13 years that the United Nations has had this on its docket. And while there's been progress, the progress has been slow. But if there were universal pressure from a movement, that would make a difference. But I don't know where the energy for that comes from. So that's.
So, Bruce, I have a thought about this, because it's almost a year since last September, we started talking about Maggie Kuhn and the Grey Panthers, 1972. And we saw how one person managed to create a revolution by uniting young and old in order to make changes. The thing that created the most change is identifying what changes needed to be made. I'm now loosely referring to 800 gaps that were submitted to the United Nations, but we all know that locally we can create a lot of changes too, even without the ruling of the commitment that can happen in the United Nations. I'm just thinking back to a post by Margaret Young. She is a prolific blogger, where she was writing about the lack of public toilets in Vancouver, BC, where she lives, and that causes older people to drink less before they leave home because they don't know where they can go to relieve themselves, and then they get dehydrated, and then all kinds of things happen after this. It's a local issue that can be solved locally if you identify that this is what I want to solve in the next 6 months. And so it's a continuum between the detail and the abstract, and we need to address both of them. So that's what I have to say about that, and I'm going to pass it on to Fiona.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Always come and take part in these very beautiful conversations. Yeah, I don't know, for those who don't know me as yet, I'm a nurse here in geriatrics in Germany, although my roots are from Uganda. I come from Uganda. And I just love to hear all these inclusions and plans from the UN. I was myself introduced by a friend to Pass It On Network, and I was very highly motivated and interested. And even now, during the presentation from Moira, I heard about the intention or the plans for Pass It On Network to have representatives in 16 African countries, about something I didn't get it so well. And I was really happy and inquisitive to know if in each of the African countries they have representatives already, because I hear a lot about Botswana, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania. I don't know if they already have one in Uganda, and what it takes for someone like me who, even if I'm not in Uganda, can help with whatever is needed to represent or contribute to solutions or anything that would be needed for representation for the older adults in the country. Because as we all know, most of the challenges that they are facing there is because the governments are actually, it's the African governments. When I speak about Uganda, I think it's identical with all other African countries. The government actually also contributes to the non-inclusion and neglect of the adult societies. And you very well know how our governments are really very stubborn. But I don't know if there's a plan or any concern of how they can, or how UN or Pass It On Network can put pressure or ensure a bit of more actionable processes from the high ends for the poor old communities there. Because this whole, for example, I realized that this whole thing of older of Africa lagging behind or in poverty or something is because there are no plans or processes for older adults. So everyone clings to what they have. They fear to leave offices. They fear to leave society, because they know once they get old and they will be totally forgotten. And that's why they are increasing youths, increasing numbers of joblessness, increase everything is caused by the fear for neglect and non-inclusion in societies. But when someone gets old there, so I don't know if I've explained it very well, but that is a very, very big problem, and I don't know if action will ever happen down there, because it's the governments themselves that, instead of implementing things, it's them that actually make it worse for the old adults there, unfortunately. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Fiona, for this perspective. I think it's not the first time that we hear it, not only from Uganda, but from other countries as well. It seems that the disconnect between the populace and the government is happening everywhere, even in countries that are a little bit more organized. I and I'm going to put this link in the chat in a minute, but we have a page where you can put your contact and your area of interest, and you'll find on that page other people with other interests, and you can make contact with other people in Pastor Network. So I'm going to put this link here and definitely include it in the follow-up document. What do you know? It's already 7 minutes after the hour. I have a really important request for you. I put in chat a link to a feedback link. We want to hear what your experience was in this session. What are the things that you want to hear about in next sessions? Anything you want to say, you can put there. We read everything. We take it to heart. We bring it back here. We try to stuff this 1 hour and 15 minutes with as much content that comes from all of us here that is relevant to connecting active aging advocates from everywhere. Richard.
So I feel like I'm talking a little too much, but I'm thinking about what Peter said about we're not going to solve the climate problem until we change our economy. And I think that's true of the older adults' role in society as well. I think that one of the problems with older adults, one of the reasons they are not valued, is that they are not, in our current system, economically productive. They are viewed as burdens rather than assets. Now, that's true of children, too. They don't contribute economically, but we know they're going to grow up and they'll become workers, and then they will contribute. So there's a value in investing in them. But I think in the capitalist economy, as long as older adults live on the dole, they're going to be marginalized. And so I think that it just occurs to me, listening to this conversation, that there's some very deep and profound forces at work here. And the job of reaching that transition is not just coming up with some proclamation that says older folks have rights, but it's really thinking deeply about the role of people in our society and whether they are simply valued as an economic asset and as an economic contributor, or if there are other ways to think about them.
Great point, Richard.
Something that I learned from Moira. Moira is a big believer in self-efficacy and agency, meaning whatever control you have on your life, use it. It could be small control, but even if it's small control, you should still use it and not just wait for other people to solve your problems. And I'm saying it because we often hear about and speak about older adults in a victim language as opposed to a partnership language. And it's the same thing if you're a patient, you work with your doctor, you don't wait for your doctor to cure you, you work with the doctor to collaborate on getting well together. And for me, it is true for anything in life. There's partnership and collaboration here, and you use what you have the best you can. So that's me.
So just to respond a little, the one thing that I think, and this goes to Richard too, when I think about the civil rights movement in the United States, there are lots of people who could make the argument for many years that it was only a matter of people bootstrapping on their own that would change it. But we know that that's not true, that it's both things, that it's people have to be self-advocates and be self-advocating, but it also requires creating structural change that allows people. So for people becoming, older adults becoming economically important to the system also requires the system creating pathways for that to happen. So it's, you know, it's complex in that way. It isn't just about one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an example from yesterday. I had lunch with a good friend of mine. She's 88. She lives in California. She was here in Seattle. She has one sister in Oregon and one sister in Seattle. Both of them are having severe health problems. They're younger than her. And she just shuttles between California, Seattle, Portland, and California, trying to help all the sisters with all kinds of stuff that we know that in the US, for example, there's something that's called the Area Agency of Aging, and it has gazillions of resources that most people don't know are available for them, for older adults. And we went through this webpage for Seattle, and I said, well, this could help you, sister. This could help you, sister, instead of you doing all that stuff at the age of 88. And this is one of those things. You have maybe an infrastructure, and you have people who don't know that it exists. Somehow, I think Verna mentioned it before, but it's maybe with more digital equity, we're going to bring these people and services together where digital equity exists. Maybe not. Maybe we need some other things. We're all here, really brilliant people. We can probably also come up with some ideas that we can bring to our local governments.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, I've been having technical problems, which is why I've hesitated to jump in. You know, this makes me think I'm in a resident-directed community. We're 100 and so many people. In Colorado, within the last year, we've lost like 50 to 60 communities have closed. We're still doing really well. We're a wonderful model, but we do the gardening, we run our store, we have a retail buyer and manager, we initiate programming, we facilitate the program, and I can go on and on and on and on. The quality of life, of meaning and purpose is very high here. We are equals with leadership, we collaborate with them, and so on and so forth. And, you know, I was interested because I'm looking at the international topics of concern, and they're very much our topics of concern: autonomy and lifelong learning and participation in decision-making. You know, the local is very much connected to the international. But I think if we look at some of the little models, we start with communities, we look at Singapore, and we just lay the systems out and see so many overlaps to see where the gifts and strengths are. We knock people over with our gifts, you know, they have to move out of the way. So, but of course that takes leadership to support it. You do need an infrastructure. You do need a supportive society around you. But it's a wonderful discussion. I think, you know, it's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, just Verna, why were all these other communities closing?
Economics, COVID.
Okay.
They're crashing around us. Also, the model is changing. It's all going to home services. So you won't see as many communities unless it's maybe more memory care or something like that. But, you know, we'll have to see what happens.
Sylvia?
Yeah, this word community for me is a key. When this year, when you shared all that is happening in Singapore, it is all about community building. Because if we think about traditional Buddhist communities, very small ones, there are the children, there are the elders, and they live together and help each other. So recreating that in our society will make a huge difference, because in that way we also something that economy is not all, it's not only be productive about earnings and things like that. It's not only about money. It is much more than money, meaning that it is not only the exchange, it is something that unites us in a common ground where we are, our lives are supported. So when we think about the mainstream, it is all about exchange. So in communities, there is something more than that. So that can be very inspiring, and there are many around the world. Okay, thank you for bringing this. Sometimes it's difficult for me to express myself in English, so thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Osnat. Thank you. And we definitely look forward to seeing you all in September for a really interesting zip around the world, 3 continents, and the view on one of the most vital subjects of the world, digital. Yeah. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say, in the chat, I put Maggie Kuhn's 5 M's. And it's each one of us can have a look at those 5 M's and see which part we want to play in our active lives with it. And it's just she put it so nicely. So we'll include that in the notes that go off to you, and you just go through the 5 M's and see which of them suits you best.
And if you're really curious, you can go back to our YouTube channel and look at
right.
September, October, November, and I think December, where we started with the Grey Panthers and moved on to present time and how we are working and facilitating all that. And that's it.
And
see you next month. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.